Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain an action, drama, sci-fi film called Looper. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In 2044, Joe studies the French language while waiting in a field. He checks the time and readies his gun, pointing to an empty tarp on the ground. Suddenly, a man appears out of nowhere with a bag over his head. Joe shoots the man and collects his reward from the man's bag. Due to a future tracking system, hiding bodies from the authorities is nearly impossible. Because of this, mobs use an illegal time travel machine to send their targets to the past. Assassins known as loopers dispose of the targets and collect silver bars from their bodies as payment. After finishing his last assignment, Joe eats at a nearby diner before heading to a pawn shop to swap his silver bars for cash. Dressed in a fine suit, he picks up his friend Seth, a TK or a telekinetic. TKs first appeared years ago, and the world assumed they'd become superheroes. But in the end, the TKs just use their powers to show off. Joe and Seth head to a club where Joe meets up with a showgirl named Susie. He joins fellow loopers and learns that one of them, Zach, just closed his loop. Upon signing up as a looper, they agreed to assassinate their older self if they are still alive in 30 years to ensure that their clients will not be linked back to them. In return, they'll receive gold bars as their final payment. This is called closing the loop. Joe and the loopers celebrate Zach's retirement, using recreational substances, and partying. Over the next few days, Joe follows this routine, receiving his assignment, having breakfast at a diner, cashing in his silver, and drinking with his fellow loopers. One night, Joe wakes up to a panicked Seth tapping on his window. From how he looked, Joe already knows what Seth had done. When he received his latest target, Seth recognized the lullaby that the man was singing. The target was his older self. Unable to kill his older self, Seth removed the man's gag, allowing old Seth to warn him about the future. A man known as the Rainmaker took over the city in the future and is now closing all the loops. After the warning, old Seth escapes, putting the younger Seth in danger. Joe tells Seth to run but is interrupted when a group of loopers bangs on his door. Seth begs for Joe to help him. Joe knows he'll be in danger if he does, but given their friendship, Joe decides to take the risk. Under his carpet is a hidden floor safe where Seth hides. Joe opens the door, allowing Kid Blue to search his apartment before taking him to their boss. While waiting, Kid Blue mocks Joe's gun, which he believes is for people who can't shoot. Joe insults his injury, pissing off Kid Blue enough to aim his gun at Joe. Kid Blue gets knocked to the side when the door opens, accidentally firing his weapon, embarrassing himself to the boss. Joe is invited inside by Abe, a man from the future, sent by the syndicate to deal with the loopers. They are surrounded by Abe's elite force, the Get Man. The conversation starts casually until Abe brings up Seth, whom they're sure met with Joe after the incident. Joe feigns ignorance, prompting Abe to remind him of how he was recruited as the youngest looper in their group, which improved Joe's life. When Joe isn't swayed, Abe bargains that they'll take his hidden stash of silver bars if he doesn't give them Seth. This makes Joe think twice, wondering if it's worth putting himself and his future at risk for Seth. Back to a corner, Joe finally gives up Seth. Meanwhile, old Seth runs with his gold bars when he notices an arrow-shaped scar on his hand. He pulls down his sleeve, revealing an address written on his arm. He tries to ignore it, but one by one his fingers, then his nose go missing. Knowing the threat is real, old Seth drives recklessly to the location but loses a foot then his tongue, causing him to crash. As he walks out of the car, his legs disappear as well. He crawls to the door with only half his arms left. The door opens, and he closes his eyes, knowing his fate. Kid Blue shoots the old Seth and takes the body inside a dark room with the young Seth mutilated. Guilty over giving up his friend, Joe spends the night with Susie, where he reminisces about his mother. Joe offers half of his savings for her and her child, but Susie isn't interested. Joe arrives home and opens his floor safe where his stash is hidden. He arranges the bars and finds one stained with Seth's blood. The next day, Joe waits for his target in the cornfield, but it doesn't arrive on time. Dreading what this could mean, Joe stares at the empty tarp until finally, a man appears unbound and without a bag on his head. The two recognize each other immediately. Old Joe swiftly turns his back around, allowing young Joe to shoot at the gold bars instead. He throws a gold bar on young Joe's face before knocking him out. Young Joe wakes up at sunset with his older self nowhere in sight. He heads back to the city, smashing his phone and hiding as he makes his way to his apartment. There, he finds the place torn apart. Joe takes a roll of cash and a gun he still has hidden before noticing a lit cigarette on the floor with his stash of silver. Someone is close by. Kid Blue and the Gat Men enter, forcing Joe to hide. Kid Blue takes the remaining silver bars from the panic room but stops when he hears a creak on the floor. He turns to shoot, but Joe knocks him down and into the floor safe, shutting the door to trap Kid Blue. The Gat Man hears the commotion and chases after Joe, causing Joe to fall off the fire escape. In another timeline where Joe successfully assassinates his older self, he takes all his money and travels to China, where he lives off his savings until he runs out. To earn more, he turns to a life of crime until he meets a beautiful woman. Upon marrying the love of his life, Joe settles down, living a more peaceful life. 30 years in the future, Joe wakes up with numbers in his palm. 3 men arrive, burning down his house after taking him away. They prepare to send him back in time, but he fights, knocking out all 3 men. He looks into the time machine, wondering about his options. He goes inside and travels back to the past, where he meets his younger self. The old Joe takes young Joe's truck to the city, where he gathers supplies and hides. While recovering in an alley, he sees young Joe's recent actions in his mind. Using this memory, old Joe tracks down young Joe, spotting him just before he goes into the apartment. He sees Kid Blue and the Gat Man enter the building, then plots his following action. Old Joe shoots Kid Blue's driver and takes his gun. On the side of the building, he sees young Joe fall from the fire escape and shoots the Gat Man from the building. Old Joe takes his younger self away to prevent him from being captured. At Abe's office, Kid Blue is in tears, begging for a second chance to find Joe. Not taking him seriously, Abe tells him to go home and let the grown-ups do the work. Later that evening, old Joe is at the library, searching for the numbers on his palm. He locates 3 children and prints a map to find them before spotting a scar on his arm. It's a message that was carved into young Joe's arm. The following morning, old Joe heads to the diner that young Joe often visits. There, he finds young Joe alone, waiting for him. Both now bear the name Beatrix on their arms, the name of the waitress who takes their order. Young Joe explains how old Joe should die and let him live the life he earned, but when old Joe dares him to shoot him there, he doesn't. Curious, young Joe asks if he knows what's about to happen, but old Joe refuses to go into detail that doesn't matter. He admits that his memories are now clouded, given the new timeline. Old Joe will be able to remember what young Joe does after he's done it. But no matter what changes in this timeline, old Joe is sure that young Joe will meet his future wife, who will save his life. Old Joe recounts how his wife helped him get clean and how she got shot when the men took him away. Old Joe talks about the Rainmaker, who came out of nowhere and took over 5 major cities alone. The numbers written on old Joe's palm are clues he received to track down the Rainmaker. He knows that the Rainmaker is alive in this timeline, and he plans to kill him to prevent his wife's death. Young Joe thinks the plan is crazy. He insists on seeing his future wife's face, promising that he'll avoid her and thus saving her life. Old Joe refuses to give up on his wife, however. When young Joe moves, old Joe knocks him out and grabs him, realizing that the diner is suddenly empty. Gat men arrive at the diner, and old Joe shoots them quickly but releases young Joe. Young Joe grabs a piece of old Joe's map and shoots him along with other Gat men. Old Joe jumps out of the window and gets chased by the Gat men, Kid Blue, and Joe. Young Joe stops, having run out of bullets. When he recognizes Kid Blue, he runs away, using Seth's old bike to escape. To lead the Gat men away, he abandons the motorcycle in the middle of the field and checks the piece of the map. On a nearby farm, Sarah tends to her home when she hears the door open. While locking it, she spots someone in the field and takes her gun to confront him. Thinking that it's a beggar hoping to steal her crops, she shouts her threats before heading back home. Hidden in the field is young Joe, who is experiencing withdrawal symptoms. Back in Abe's office, he commends Kid Blue for tracking down Joe using Seth's bike but is not willing to waste resources on him. Kid Blue surrenders his gun then tearfully begs for another chance. Instead, Abe grabs his hammer and smashes Kid Blue's hand before the Gat men take him away. That evening, Sarah notices the light in her barn lit and takes her gun before investigating. She shuts the light off but hears rustling in the field. Sensing danger, she raises her gun at the shadowy figure approaching her. Inside the field, young Joe wakes up, hearing Sarah. Sarah fires a warning shot, but it causes her to trip and fall. Joe gets in between them, thinking that it's old Joe, but instead, it's a beggar who runs away. Young Joe collapses, forcing Sarah to help him as he goes through withdrawal. When Sarah goes into the house, a young boy comes out and gives Joe water. Sarah arrives, picking up her son, Sid, and putting him back to bed. Back in the town, chaos ensues as Gat men continue their search. Beneath them all, old Joe hides in the sewers and begins to see young Joe's recent memories of Sarah. Not wanting to forget his wife, he looks at her picture and remembers falling in love with her. When he sees her face in his mind clearly, he calms down. Young Joe wakes up in Sarah's barn, handcuffed to the bed. Sarah finds him and gives him the key to the handcuff, telling him to leave. But Joe insists on staying despite Sarah's threats. He gives her the piece of map for Sarah to confirm that he's at the correct location. Sarah looks to the numbers written on the map, recognizing it. Thinking he's a threat, Sarah shoots Joe and demands why he's at her farm. Defeated, Joe confesses that he's a looper and got his map from another looper from the future. Sarah figures that the target is her son, given that the numbers are Sid's birthday and the hospital's location where he was born. Young Joe believes that old Joe intends to kill the 3 children born in that hospital on that same day, as one of them will become the Rainmaker. As they discuss this, old Joe approaches a boy living in one of the addresses. He hesitates but shoots anyway. After the deed, Joe walks away, weeping as he's conflicted about what he's done. Back at the farm, Sarah tends to young Joe's injuries while he plots how to trap old Joe. She keeps Sid away from Joe, still wary of him but trusts that he will protect them. That evening, Sid wakes up Joe to ask him to play. Sid fixes his toys, impressing Joe given his young age. Sid asks about his job, admitting that he'd like a gun too so he can stop things from happening. Joe learns that Sarah is not Sid's real mother, and the kid remembers the day his real mother died. In the morning, Joe hands Sarah a toy that they can use to signal each other. Recognizing Sid's handiwork, Sarah learns that Joe was with Sid last night and that the child doesn't think of her as his real mother. But Sarah asserts that Sid is her son, but he first grew up with her sister, whom Sid believes is his real mother. Joe brings up when Sid asked for his gun, convincing Sarah that he should stay away from the child. In the afternoon, Sid and Sarah argue about a game that ends with Sid throwing a tantrum. The wind picks up in the room as Sid shouts at her. Frightened, Sarah goes to her room and hides inside a safe in her closet. After he calms down, Sarah comforts Sid, who apologizes. In the city, old Joe goes to the second location for his next target. To his surprise, the next target is Susie's daughter. Back on the farm, a man named Jesse knocks on Sarah's door. When asked if she's alone, Sarah lies that her husband will be arriving soon. Jesse insists on entering the house, giving Sarah no other choice. Young Joe enters from the back door as Sarah and Jesse head to the kitchen. Jesse shows her pictures of young Joe and old Joe, but Sarah claims not to have seen either. Sarah and Jesse sit in the living room, where he asks her about her family. Joe hides behind the couch and spots Sid at the stairs, who motions for him to shoot the man. Joe warns the kid to head up, but Sid slowly steps down instead. Sarah spots her son coming down the stairs. She stands up by the window to divert Jesse's eyes away, allowing Sid to slip behind him. The two hear something from the kitchen and investigate. While they're away, Sid hides inside the closet, followed by Joe. Outside, Joe and Sid open a trapdoor that connects the lawn to the basement. Joe assures Sid that he knows Jesse, trusting that he won't hurt Sarah if he doesn't find Joe. Joe explains that his mother abandoned him as a child, but he escaped the men who took him. Joe wished that he found and saved his mother, but he couldn't. Hearing this, Sid promises that he will protect Sarah. They spot Jesse leaving, prompting the two to exit the hiding place. Sarah greets her son and takes him back home. In the city, Kid Blue watches security footage of the apartment where Susie lives, spotting old Joe surveying the area. At night, Sarah is unable to sleep, finding herself lonely. She calls on Joe using the toy, making him rush to her bedroom, thinking that she's in danger. Sarah closes the door behind him and kisses him passionately. After their intimate night, Sarah shows Joe her telekinetic power, which is better than he'd ever seen. Sarah knows that the man coming for Sid is the old Joe, recognizing the pictures that Jesse showed him. Despite this, Sarah believes that young Joe will protect Sid. She recalls being at a party on the night her sister was killed, years after she left Sid with her. Sarah doesn't think Sid will truly love her as his mother, but she's content with just making sure he's safe. In the morning, Joe finds Jesse holding a gun to Sarah's head. Joe bargains that he will give half of his stash to Jesse if he allows him to assassinate his own older self and get things right with Abe. But Jesse tells him that Abe intends to hunt him down no matter what. Jesse gets distracted by Sid, aiming his gun at the kid. Scared, the kid slips and falls down the steps. The toys from the living room start shaking until all the items float in the air. Sarah rushes towards them, but instead of Sid, she grabs Joe and pushes him out of the way. As soon as Sid hits the floor, he gets up, making the furniture and Jesse float in the air. He screams in anger, and the house blows up, pushing Joe and Sarah out the door. Meanwhile, old Joe storms into Susie's house, ready to kill her daughter. But instead, Kid Blue shoots him with a taser and knocks him out. At the farm, Sarah rushes back inside, searching for Sid. After seeing Sid's powers, Joe realizes he is the future Rainmaker. Sarah reveals that her sister died after a bookshelf fell on Sid, causing him to get scared and unleash his powers. She promises that Sid will learn to control his powers, that she will raise him as a good man. This doesn't convince Joe. He heads into the field and finds Sid covered in Jesse's blood. Despite his beliefs that the child is dangerous, he can't harm him. Deciding to protect the two, Joe calculates that either old Joe or the Gap men will come by the farm. He instructs Sarah to escape with Sid while he deals with the rest. At Abe's office, Kid Blue eagerly delivers old Joe. He learns that young Joe is at the farm, and the Gap men are rallied up to take him in. Hearing this, Joe fights back, able to steal Kid Blue's gun and shoot him. He easily tears through the rest of the Gap men and takes their weapons. With a dead Gap man's body as his shield, Joe uses grenades to take down the entire group. Abe watches this happening through his security monitors, knowing that the old Joe is coming from him. He and the surviving Gap men prepare for a fight. Kid Blue wakes up with his leg injured. He limps to Abe's office, seeing everyone, including the boss, dead. He sees the map marked in Abe's wall, knowing where to find old Joe for revenge. At the farm, young Joe waits on the road and spots a truck on the other end. Old Joe steps down and offers him a gold bar, telling him that he'd be free as no one will come after him anymore. However, young Joe refuses to let him kill Sid. He shoots at old Joe, but Kid Blue drives by, interrupting them. Young Joe shoots the road, causing a dust cloud to block Kid Blue's view. He shoots up when the vehicle passes by, successfully killing Kid Blue. When the dust cloud settles, however, old Joe is gone. Back in the house, Sarah loads up the truck and drives away. She spots old Joe at the end of the road and speeds up, choosing to run him down. Sid screams in fear, causing the truck to toss in the air and crash. Sarah takes Sid and runs into the field while old Joe shoots them. Sarah trips and sees Sid get shot in the cheek. Angered and in pain, Sid releases a strong force that throws both Sarah, old Joe, and young Joe's truck from the road. Sarah and old Joe are lifted in midair as Sid's anger grows. To calm him, Sarah whispers to the child, saying that she loves him. This brings tears to the child's eyes. He turns his powers off, releasing the adults. Sarah embraces Sid but tells him to run as she sees Old Joe get up. Old Joe aims his gun at her as she shields her son. Young Joe watches the scene from afar, and everything falls into place. Young Joe pictures Sarah getting shot by Old Joe, but Sid escapes on a train. Sid will vow revenge on the looper that killed his mother, turning him into the Rainmaker. Knowing this, young Joe turns his gun to himself, choosing to change the timeline by ending himself. Old Joe instantly disappears before Sarah, who reunites with her son, finally safe from the looper. Carrying her son, Sarah looks at the far end of the field, realizing what Joe had done. She takes her son back home, tending to his injury and tucking him to bed. Sid embraces her as he begins to accept her as his mother. Back to the road, Sarah finds silver bars spilled from the overturned truck that young Joe drove. She goes to his body, brushing his hair softly as she mourns for the man that gave her and her son a better future. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.